It has been a minute since the last video. It's been well over a month now since the point guard ranking tier list. I did love doing that, but it's not that I don't want to do videos anymore. Still love doing them. Just had a heap of stuff on, was super busy. University, I had a heap of assignments due, went away for a week, got crook for a week. Hence the voice is still a bit raspy, still recovering from that. So it's been a while, but we're back. And so is the NBA. We're like less than a month away from the opening night in the regular season. We're like a week away from, or like 2 weeks away from preseason, a week away from a lot of like training camps and stuff. And the NBA is sort of in full gear. So I wanted to get back into it. I wanted to make some videos, and I wanted to, I love doing the player ranking list. They just take forever. So at the moment, I'm just going to do some videos on teams. And I was trying to think, okay, what teams do I want to focus on before the season starts? Who do I want to get my opinions out there? Say, this is what I think about this team before the season starts. Mainly just so like, if I get it right, I can be like, hey, look at this. I got it right. I picked it early. Not bandwagon. I knew it. I didn't know it. Whatever. So I was thinking through, in particular, the Eastern Conference, because I think the Eastern Conference is in a sort of a cool spot. It's sort of a bit of a changeover over there. There's some new teams coming up. And I was like, okay, I want to talk about Eastern Conference playoff teams. And I started like penciling in all the teams. And suddenly I looked at, I'm like 11 teams deep in teams that are guaranteed to make the playoffs, plus a couple wild cards. And I just realized for the first time in a while, just how deep the Eastern Conference is. Like, let's just go through it quickly. Locks for the Eastern Conference playoffs. So this is for the playoffs. Celtics, everything is going on with their head coach. I do know about that. I don't want to get into that. It will affect them maybe, but I don't think it knocks them out of the playoffs. They were in the finals last year. I think they make the playoffs again. Philadelphia, love Harden, hate Harden, wherever you sit. They've got a great team. Embiid's out. Embiid's going to be like all in. I think Harden's going to have a comeback year. I think you've got Harris, you've got Maxey, you've got some good players over there. They're making the playoffs. Milwaukee, goes without saying, you've got Giannis. Miami Heat, yeah, they're old, but they're also the Miami Heat, and they've also got Eric Spoelstra, and they've also got one of the best coaching staff and schemes and all that of all time. And they've still got Butler, they've still got Hero, they've still got Adebayo. They're going to make it. And finally, I'm locking in Cleveland. I know they didn't make it last year, but I'm high on Cleveland. I love this team. I really like Darius Garland. I think the Donovan Mitchell trade was an amazing trade. Also, that happened since the last video. Great trade for Cleveland. I think him and Garland are going to work perfectly in offense together. I see that small backcourt. I think, it's just going to be Utah 2.0. No, because instead of having Royce O'Neal or Bogdanovic at the 4, you've got Evan Mobley, who is going to go on to be one of the best defenders in the league. You've already got Allen, who is already one of the best defenders in the league and best rim protectors. They're going to be fine. I think that Cleveland team is really good. I think they make the playoffs next year. I'm locking them in at this point. They're not even penciled in. They're locks at this point for me. Then you go to the pencil ins, and these are teams that, like, barring like an injury or some drama and stuff, I think they're just too good to miss the Eastern Conference playoffs. And that's the Toronto Raptors, who, like, I was so close to locking them in, but like, feels weird to have 6 playoff locks before the season even starts, you know? So I kept them in the pencil in, but like, if I'm penciling in their names, I've got the permanent marker just like sitting in my hand. Like 5 games in, I could just, yep, that's it. Toronto's making it. If I see like even the tiniest step from Scotty Barnes, yep, they're in. And then the Brooklyn Nets, who, after all the crazy turmoil and everything that happened in the offseason, they've still got Durant and Kyrie Irving and most likely Ben Simmons and Seth Curry and Joe Harris and a bunch of other talented guys. You got Nicholas Claxton, got Cam Thomas, Royce O'Neal they picked up in the offseason, picked up another wing who was at TJ Warren. They're super talented. And if they can keep the drama out of it for 82 games, they will easily make the playoffs. The only reason that they're not a lock-in is just because it's the Brooklyn Nets. And who knows if Durant's even going to play? Who knows if Irving's even going to play? Who knows if Ben Simmons is even going to play? They could be running a lineup of like Irving, Seth Curry, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and like Royce O'Neal or TJ Warren or whoever you want to be that 5th starter. And that's like a top 3 team. That's a playoff. That's a finals contender. Or they could run a lineup of like Curry, Joe Harris, TJ Warren, Cam Thomas, and Nicholas Claxton, and it's like, that's like a 13 seed because Irving, Durant, and Simmons are all injured, or 2 of them are sitting out because they're protesting something or whatever. So like, because of that, I can't lock in the Nets, but if they play, they'll be in. So that's 7 teams, okay? Celtics, Sixers, Bucks, Heat, Cavs, Raptors, Nets. locks and pencil ins. So then there's like an 8th spot, and obviously you've got the play-in tournament, but I have not mentioned yet the Chicago Bulls, who made the playoffs last year as a 6th seed. They're getting Patrick Williams back from who they didn't have for the regular season, and they needed that big wing. Or they had him for like the end of the regular season, but like he wasn't healthy. He played how many games last year? Just trying to see. I think it was like 30 games in the end, maybe a bit more. Games played. He played 17 games. Okay, so he was not like he was still recovering by the time he got back. They needed that big wing. That can be him. They made it to the playoffs and stole a game at least off the Bucks, maybe even 2. I think it was only 1. And you're adding Lonzo Ball to that team and a healthy Patrick Williams, hopefully. Chicago's going to be really good. I really like that team. I think Lonzo Ball is possibly the most underrated player in the NBA in terms of how much he boosts a good team from being good to like great, and I think he can do that with his Bulls lineup. Got the Hawks, who just traded for DeJounte Murray. You got Trae Young, you got Collins, you got DeAndre Hunter, another one of the most underrated players in the NBA in my opinion. Clint Capella, Onyeka Okongwu. They lost Herter. I think they got Bogdanovic still. Jalen Johnson hopefully finally gets a game from Duke. Be good to see my Blue Devil there, but yeah, like Atlanta. That's the 9th team I've mentioned. Okay, so one of those teams definitely has to miss. At least one of those teams. Then you still got the Knicks, who just paid like $25 million a year to Brunson for 4 years because they want to be competing. They want to be back in the playoffs. You got the Wizards, who just paid Bradley Beal like 5 years, $250 million with a no trade clause, so they can't even get rid of him if it goes badly. They've got Porzingis, they've got Kuzma. They want to be competing. But that's team 11. So that like one of those teams has to miss the play-in tournament. Okay? So one of the Bulls, the Hawks, the Nets, the Raptors have to miss the playoffs. One of the Knicks or the Wizards and them have to miss the play-in tournament. Haven't even got to the Charlotte Hornets with LaMelo Ball, who got a lot of feedback that LaMelo should have been in the top 10 point guard list. Probably should have been on rethinking it. But they're like the 12th seed. Got the Detroit Pistons, who just traded for Bogdanovic, just drafted Ivy, got Cade Cunningham in his second year, got Bay, got Stewart, got these young guys. They want to start competing soon. They want to be fighting for a play-in tournament spot, and that's 13 teams just there. 5 of those teams aren't making the playoffs. 3 of them aren't even making the play-in tournament, and all of them have made moves this offseason that are all in. That's the weird thing about the Eastern Conference, is that there are so many teams saying, like, we're going all in with these moves. Like, I know it wasn't an all-in move because they like didn't have to trade any picks or really any young players like Saban Lee, obviously. But, like, the Pistons just traded for Bogdanovic. They're obviously wanting to start looking to get better. And rightfully so. You've got Cunningham, you've got Ivy, you've got Stewart, you've got Bay, you've got these young guys. Look to compete sooner rather than later. You don't want them getting upset. You don't want to go through the drama of all that. Charlotte, they're wanting to compete with LaMelo and Rozier and Hayward and PJ Washington. Obviously, they had the Miles Bridges thing, so I'm guessing he won't be playing next season, obviously. So that is a step back for them, but they still want to compete. The Wizards just paid Beal because they think they can still make the playoffs. And the Knicks just paid Brunson. The Hawks just traded for DeJounte Murray. The Bulls, they made their moves last year with getting Lonzo and DeRozan and these guys. Like, all these teams recently have made big moves to say, we're going all in. And 3 of them can't even make the play-in tournament. So that's what's so crazy to me, is the fact that currently there's so many teams that are just going all in the East. Not all in, but like who are competing in the Eastern Conference. So number one, it's going to be super competitive next season. But also, should some of these teams consider tanking? Like, it's an amazing draft class. You got Victor Wembanyama. You got the twins. I forget their the Thompson twins. There's a heap of other good players in this draft class. Should Washington just say, like, what's the market for Kuzma and even Porzingis and a bunch of these other vets, that Will Barton and all these guys, and do we just say tank? Because, like, you only have to make like a couple trades and suddenly you're like the 14th team in the Eastern Conference and you've got a top 5 pick in the lottery. So, like, these teams are like, the Wizards are closer to being like the bottom of the Eastern Conference than they are to being the top. And they've just paid Beal this crazy money, and they've traded for Porzingis and all this stuff. So, like, I think a couple of these teams should maybe look to, like, I think the Wizards are the obvious one because, like, they haven't just made a move. They made the moves, like, last season, and they re-signed a guy. But, like, should they just look to tank? Because, like, you're fighting to get into the play-in tournament. Like, you're already, in my books, out of the play-in tournament. You have to fight to get in there to win 2 games to make it to the playoffs where you're probably going to get swept by Philly or Milwaukee. Like, is it really worth that? Or, with a really good draft class, should they maybe look to trade Kuzma and Barton and Porzingis and Monte Morris and some of these older vets to other contenders? Because there's so many teams that are contending and so many teams that are willing to take on these contracts because they're saying, hey, we think we have what it takes to win it all. So yeah, I think it's just a weird place at the moment in the NBA where teams that, like, in the past, you're like, oh yeah, they're one move away from being a contender. No, they're like one move away from making the playoffs. They're at least like 3 or 4 moves away from being a contender. Suddenly you have to really reevaluate how good your roster is compared to the current state of the league, because that Wizards team, you're running Monte Morris, Will Barton, Bradley Beal, Kuzma, Porzingis, Gafford, a bunch of other guys. They've got a stack, like a 13-man deep rotation. That's easily making the playoffs 5 years ago in the Eastern Conference. But now, that has to be the Bulls, the Hawks, the Knicks, at least one of those teams. And then that's just to get in to lose to like Nets, Raptors, Cavs, Heat, Bucks, Sixers, Celtics, all those teams I'm taking in a series over the Wizards. So if the Wizards make it in, it's just to lose in the first round. And they'd probably have to make a trade to get to that point. Or if you're Charlotte and you're really wanting to compete, obviously Charlotte's a bit of a different spot because they're a younger team, so they can continue just to build it. Rozier's also getting older. Hayward's getting older. You don't want to like keep just building. Like, look at Minnesota. They've got Anthony Edwards into the playoffs already. They're already building a really good team around him. I think they want to start building more around the Melo Ball. Their plans are thrown out the window with what happened with Bridges. So I feel bad for the Charlotte front office because of that. But yeah, should Charlotte look to trade Rozier and Hayward and get cap space? Maybe is that a Russ trade? Maybe that's the Lakers and me talking. But do they trade Rozier and Hayward and try and like tank for a year, and then try and get like a? Do they try and get Wembanyama? But I don't think they can get to the bottom of the league because they've still got LaMelo, they've still got Washington, they're still good. But like, yeah, I just don't know. The Knicks, like, was it really worth paying Brunson for the next 4 years? And also, you've got him for the next 4 years. You've got Barrett for the next 4 years. Do you trade Randall? Do you trade Fournier? Do you see if you can dump some of these contracts, even if you attach a pick, and then dump a bunch of some of your older vets, and like tank for another year, and see if you can get a top 5 pick to add to these guys and some salary cap maybe? Because like, it's like, oh, but we're so close. We've got Brunson. We've got Randall. Yeah, but that's like still out of the playoffs at the moment. You have to make a trade to get into the playoffs, and then you're like with Washington, I'm still taking like every other team in the playoffs over the Knicks or over the Wizards or over Charlotte, and then even Atlanta. They just traded 3 first-round picks for DeJounte Murray, and they're not even in the pencil-ins. They're in like the cusp level for me on the Eastern Conference. Maybe I should be penciling them into the 8th seed, but like I'm penciling them into the 8th seed. Okay, all you need is one team below you to have a good year, and they're the first ones out, because unless something happens with the Nets or like even I don't think I almost want to lock the Raptors in. So it's like, unless something happens, you're banking on like something happening to the Nets or no team below you overperforming if you're the Hawks at this point. And that includes the Bulls. So like, that's Lonzo, Levine, DeRozan, Vucevic, who isn't that great, but like is still decent. Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Derek Jones Jr., who I think is a really good player. But yeah, I think the Eastern Conference is going to be stacked next year. I think a couple teams should really consider tanking and just think, even though this team is better than, like, this is the best roster we put together in like 5 years, it's still not making the playoffs because every team has the best roster they put together in 5 years because there's that much talent spread over so many teams because everyone's getting paid so much money at this point. Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun to watch. It'd be interesting to see what team does go for the tank. If one team does, I think it has to be the Wizards or the Knicks. I don't think the Hawks can after trading 3 first-round picks for Murray. The Hornets, maybe. The Hornets is probably actually more likely than the Knicks, if we're being honest, because like they could just keep LaMelo and Washington and trade everyone else and let Book Knight and these guys have a bit of a run. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Maybe there's a team I'm over rating, like Miami or Cleveland or Toronto, but I don't think so. Like, I can't see a world where those teams without an injury, obviously, fall out of the playoffs. It's going to be really interesting. I really don't know. My pick for the Eastern Conference, Bucks if healthy. If not the Bucks, I think the Sixers. It would have been the Celtics, but with all the coaching stuff, maybe that works out fine. Maybe like in 2 weeks the drama's gone, in which case I'm going the Celtics. But at the moment I'm going Bucks if healthy. If the Bucks aren't healthy, Sixers or Celtics if they can figure out what's happening with the coach. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting in this Eastern Conference. It's going to be super competitive. Be interesting to see if teams do become sellers at the deadline, how early they become sellers, how quickly they try and get into a tank if they realize, oh wow, we're not going to be making the playoffs after like 15 games. Maybe they pull like a Houston from a few years ago where it was like 15 games in, they traded Harden to Brooklyn. It's going to be interesting. This is going to be super competitive next year. Alright, that's going to do it for me for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to hit the like button. Comment below who you see missing out on the Eastern Conference Finals. I'd be interested to know. As always, check me out on those social media links below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.